of course, what the government will say, and Janet Yellen continues to assure us that the banking system is fine, which tells me that it's absolutely not fine, is how I interpret her statement. But of course, there is a de facto promise of a bailout, even though we have all sorts of regulatory structures that are supposed to prevent this kind of mismanagement. But as you say, it's baked into the system. But can they bail out everybody?
Yep. They can bail out everybody by converting it all to inflation, and they can get away with it because So what happened in 2008 is that they issued all the enormous quantities of money relative to how much money existed back then, and a lot of us warned that it would lead to inflation, and it did not. The reason is because the banks held on to it. Right. So they didn't, take the money and then spend it. They took it and put it in their pocket. And so if banks were to do that again, and, now that they had that enjoyable experience of 2008, sort of from their perspective, a free lunch, right? They could give out trillions of dollars without the inflation showing up immediately. That's no doubt how they'll try to do it again. So they'll try to encourage the banks to act as a token sink and keep all that money in there. And in that case, the inflation won't occur for a while, right? And then as it slowly drips out, you can blame it on whatever happens to be in the news. In the 1970s, for perspective on their ability to find excuses, in the 1970s, when inflation first started taking off, the party line from the Fed at the time, Arthur Burns, was that this was overpopulation and it was the earth running out of resources. And then, of course, it was the Arab oil embargo, right, which was a one-time event. Okay, that doesn't explain a decade of ongoing inflation. So they grab whatever's in the newspapers and they deploy that, and they will do that again, especially if it's gradual enough that it comes back out. So, the Fed, Treasury, they all lie. They're very open about it. They call it guidance, and they write academic papers on this. This is not a conspiracy theory. They celebrate skillful lying, and they guide on inflation. They guide on bank stability. There are leaks just recently that came out from an FDIC meeting a couple months ago where they're sitting there, they're talking to each other about how fragile the banks are. And the one guy says, well, we really shouldn't go public with this, because it might worry the public because the public doesn't realize, the public thinks the banks are safer than I think many of us in this room do. And the rest of the guys in the room laugh. Right, so this is the FDIC. Now, this was recorded because it was a broadcast to the very, very small number of bankers in the United States who sit there and actually listen to FDIC meetings. So this starts to look an awful lot like an insider club here. We got a bunch of guys sitting around telling jokes how the American banking system is fragile and at risk of collapse. And by gum, don't tell the normies.